Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Knicks Film School Pregame Show. My name is Andrew Claudio, a.k.a. GMAC, and it is time to do another exit interview. This time, we're unfortunately wrapping up the Knicks season and talking about the series against the Indiana Pacers. Thankfully, we're joined by Caitlin Cooper. We'll talk about the highs, the lows, the ins and outs of this series, what went right for the Pacers, what went wrong for the Knicks. This conversation took place on Monday. Which is why this is a programming note at the top. The conversation you're about to hear makes no reference to the Knicks firing Tom Thibodeau because he hadn't been fired yet. I intended to release this episode Tuesday afternoon. In fact, I was putting the finishing touches on the main part of the episode when the news dropped that Tom Thibodeau would no longer be the Knicks head coach. So that's why I just wanted to give you a heads up at the top that Tom Thibodeau's firing is not referenced in this episode. However, reasons for why you might want to move on from this head coach are referenced. So you'll enjoy that, hopefully, at least listen for that in a little bit. Some thoughts on the firing, on the decision that the Knicks made to move on from Thibs. From my end, I've got 3 bullet points. The first one in my mind is that it was time. I respect the man. I approach, I guess, with the necessary humility you have to have when talking about a head coach, that I thought he did a great job here with the Knicks, but I think I speak for everybody that even though the results that a lot of people point to of 10 playoff wins, first Eastern Conference Finals in 25 years, you're 6 wins away from a title, the process left something to be desired, whether it's the regular season process, whether it's the playoff process of the first couple rounds, the fact that you had to play from behind the majority of this playoffs. I don't know how sustainable or repeatable that type of run is. And the seas parted for you to make a run here. And unfortunately, you lost to a lower seed. Again, that doesn't diminish the fact that the only reason you got to lose to a lower seed is because you dethroned the higher seed, which was the defending champions, which needs to be remembered when that gets brought up. But as far as I'm concerned, my first thought when I saw the move was that it was time. And in talking with my buddies over at Game Theory, they brought up the same thing, that you can't argue with the results. You can absolutely talk about the process, though, and why you might want to consider a new head coach, or you'd welcome one, which is what I've always said. I'd welcome a new head coach. I'd understand if they kept him. And now we begin looking for a new head coach, which goes to bullet point number 2. I see a lot of suggestions being thrown out there. The floor for me is a guy that can give you 16 playoff wins, because you had a guy that could give you 10. And that's now the floor. The floor has to be 10 playoff wins. And it might not be fair to the next head coach, but it's borderline not fair to fire one that got you this far. So if you're going to make the bold decision to say that's not good enough, well, then what has to be then good enough or acceptable is a guy that gets you those other 6 playoff wins. I'm all for it. I'm all for them going and trying to find someone that can get you more creative on the offensive end, maybe finds a way to make Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson work in a defensive scheme. I think all of our people, whether it be Jeremy, John, Benji, DJ, Jeff, Sean, all of them have talked about like the different things they're looking for in a new head coach, different things you might not have seen under Thibs. I welcome all of it. I have to just say that the floor is now 10 playoff wins. You don't get that far, then you arguably are taking a step back. And like the how matters. If Jalen Brunson gets hurt, which I'm knocking on all the wood, hope that doesn't happen, then you reassess going forward. But as far as I'm concerned, the floor for the next head coach is you better be the guy that can get us at least 6 more playoff wins, or at least 10 more playoff wins with the hope of 6 more, so that we can have that parade down the Canyon of Heroes. The third bullet point is very simple for me. It's thank you, Tom Thibodeau. I came on to Knicks Film School at the end of 2019, and throughout the pandemic is when I started to really experiment with some things on the audio side, develop some things on the video side. And when we launched, really not launched the YouTube channel, but really started to make it a part of what we do here at Knicks Film School, and I started to oversee some things. I'm proud of the work that I've done, that we've all done here at Knicks Film School, and what I've built and we've built, and then the tireless hours that we've all put into this channel and into this network of content and all of that. It helps that the Knicks were good over that time, though, that from the moment we really started to take this thing seriously, the Knicks started to take this thing seriously. And it starts with Tom Thibodeau and that hiring that we hear season, even during the frustrating Kemba season the following year, like we found ways to be creative around Tom Thibodeau coverage. Then, of course, Jalen Brunson, but all of this was under his leadership. As a professional and in this industry and in this world of content creation, I thank him for giving us the thing to cover that people wanted to pay attention to. And as a fan, thank you for the best 5 years watching this team that I've gotten to enjoy since the first 5 years that I got to enjoy watching this team. And I'm saying that as a Melo stan. So I'm going to skip over the 1 to 2 years that I enjoyed watching one of my favorite Knicks, maybe my favorite Knick ever. And I'll just say this is the most success the Knicks have experienced since the beginning of my time being a Knicks fan. And I attribute a lot of credit and praise to him for adding some stability. I know that word's been brought around a lot, but you Knicks fans in your early 20s that can't understand what this team was for the majority of your lifetime will understand why some of us older heads are recognizing that you made a James Dolan team work. And we appreciate you for it. So thank you, Thibs. Please take the longest of vacations possible. You have $30 billion to spend and to do whatever you want. Like go on a cruise, go on a year-long hike, go watch any movie you want to. Go make a movie, sir. You've earned it, Tom. And hopefully you're probably, I have no idea how you feel right now. You don't let us know how you feel. I don't know if you have emotions for that matter. I just hope you're able to find a new place now that they're evicting you from Terrytown. All right, let's get to my exit interview with Caitlin Cooper. Enjoy. I have found the one positive of the Pacers going to the NBA Finals from a Knicks perspective. And that positive is that Caitlin Cooper gets to cover an NBA Finals. And I know we're all potentially begrudgingly very happy about that fact. Caitlin Cooper joins me for this exit interview here at Knicks Film School. Caitlin, welcome back. And I will be the first on at least this platform to say congratulations to the Indiana Pacers and I guess to you on this conference finals championship and a series that the Pacers just won.
Thank you. And also thank you to the Knicks Film School subscriber base and all the Knicks fans who genuinely always have really good interactions with me online. Lots of them came over and I know we're like, hey, we just watched the KFS post game and now we're going to watch it from the Pacers perspective. So I really appreciate that cross-pollination, although I'm sure a lot of Knicks fans probably aren't eager to relive the series that they just watched.
Definitely not game one. And we'll talk about that in a second. I know that a lot of people, when you come here, they're looking forward to your analysis, your deep dive, and your X's and O's, and it's some of the best. I'm sure we've established that here at Knicks Film School. I want to talk to Caitlin Cooper, the fan, if that's okay, because you've been a Pacer fan your whole life and following the team. I'm assuming, I don't know if I've ever established that you've been a Pacer fan your whole life, but like, was there a moment that I know I can feel it sometimes when we're doing a content thing, and while I obviously still feel fan emotions, the back and forth and the constant content creation can take away some of the fan side of it. Did you have a fan moment at all of, man, the Pacers are going to the NBA Finals for the first time since 2000?
Yeah, I've been lucky because a few of the games that have been on the road, I've been able to watch them with my dad. And one of my earliest memories as a kid was watching the 2005 playoffs toward the back end of Reggie Miller's career when they played the Brooklyn Nets and he forced overtime and had that dunk. And like, I still remember to this day, despite how young I was, that I was watching my dad's reaction to it more than I was actually watching the basketball. I clearly didn't understand basketball to the degree that I do now, but like, I feel very happy for all of the fans that have been there since the very beginning. Like, just to tell a really quick story, like my dad doesn't talk about playing basketball that much and stuff when he was growing up. He doesn't share the back in my day stories all that much, but I was doing a podcast and I actually got sent a mailbag question where they're like, what's your earliest memory of basketball? So I asked my dad that question and he said that it was when he went to watch an ABA game with his dad. And he loved Roger Brown. Those ABA teams, obviously, for the Pacers, won 3 championships. And when they left, he wanted the red, white, and blue basketball. and he found out that there was like a gas station chain here in Indiana that was giving them away if you had like a purchase of so much money. And so my grandpa went and got him this ball. They found out it was a plastic ball. And my dad was really disappointed. So the next time they were in Indy, they went to a sporting goods store and bought the real genuine leather ABA ball. And my dad, when he was going to school, took that ball every day, and he was literally like washing it, because if you were bouncing it on a blacktop, obviously a leather ball is not going to fare that well. So like just going back to his fandom being as early as that was, being a fan of Roger Brown and watching his reaction to watching this run, I think has brought some of the fan back out in me that I've, like what you mentioned, have somewhat lost over time when you're so focused on, get out content, analyze this, write about this. So yeah, hopefully that's not too hard for the Knicks fans to listen to. But yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely been a lot of memories and a lot of nostalgia that have gone along with this.
I definitely don't think it's hard to listen to, just from a genuine place of feeling it as a fan. And look, I'm sure you saw how Jonathan reacted to the way the Knicks won Game 6 against the Celtics, and the outpouring of emotion that came from him, our entire crew that came up on stage to celebrate that. And I had an out-of-body experience to an extent of like, oh, I still feel these things, and it's good to at least know that you're human when you get stuck into the content creation vortex. And I am at least happy that you got to feel that, even though it was at the hands of the New York Knicks. And as we transition into talking about this series, I'll just flatly ask you, and I kind of know what you're going to say, because I'm also one of those subscribers that tapped into you and Samson in your recaps. But if you had one or a couple of biggest reasons that the Pacers won this series over the Knicks, what would it be?
I mean, it's going to sound very basic, but I think I would just say it was the Pacers' adaptability. Like, even if you look at Game 6, very tellingly, the very first possession of the game, the Knicks made the adjustment in Game 5 at home to be applying at least more theoretical ball pressure, guarding. And they had OG Anunoby on Andrew Nembhard for the prior 2 games as well, but not in conjunction with Tyrese being pressured as much as he was in Game 5. And I remember thinking and looking at that, and I was like, I haven't seen an opponent do this to the Pacers yet. I have not seen somebody put their strongest length on Nembhard, because very often the Pacers' default tactic for that is they will play 4-on-4, and they're very comfortable playing 4-on-4 because they have a lot of trust in each other and are willing to get out of each other's way in that respect with how Tyrese was operating. And then you go into Game 6 at home at Gamebridge, and it's like, well, if that's how our guards are going to be guarded, then the very opening set's going to be an inverted pick and roll for Pascal Siakam with Aaron Nesmith as the back screener. And they just had more and more forms that they could have kept taking on. That's why even that morning on Saturday, I was like, what the Knicks did here, they deserve credit for making this adjustment. But I was still very confident that the Pacers would have more counters for it, and they did.
And to the Knicks fan that wonders why that was the first action that they ran, it's because Jalen Brunson was guarding Aaron Nesmith and Karl-Anthony Towns was guarding Pascal Siakam. And a gigantic question we're now facing in New York is, can you survive specifically against the high-powered offense like the Pacers that's going to make it a point to attack that specific weakness in the Knicks defense? And look, it's so funny to talk about everything the Knicks did wrong, everything the Pacers did right in a series that wasn't separated by a ton of total points scored. I believe the margin between the two teams was like 6 or 7 points at the end of the day. And look, I will now enter into a place where I don't want to, because I don't want to relive what happened at the end of Game 1, but I want to get at least your perspective on the end of it. Like, they were on their way to a Game 1 victory, and you could argue did enough to win 3 games in this series, the Knicks at least, and then force a Game 7. And I know I thought this was going 7. I know you came on here and on our crossover picked Pacers in 6, but like, this could have gone 7 had Game 1 not gone the way it went. If you could take me back in time to 3 minutes left in Game 1, how you were ready to evaluate what the Knicks had gotten off to, the start the Knicks had gotten off to, how you're feeling about the Pacers' chances in the series to that point. I know so much has happened since, so it's near impossible to do so, but how the Knicks at least looked and how the Pacers looked through the first 45 minutes of Game 1, what were you thinking about the series?
The last 3 minutes of overtime or the last 3 minutes of regulation?
Of regulation. The first 45 minutes happens. Knicks are up 14 with 2 minutes and 58 seconds left. I have that number ingrained in my mind, by the way.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I remember thinking at the start of the fourth quarter that I was like, not great that the Pacers have given up this degree of a run with Jalen Brunson on the bench, and that there was the multiple 3-shot shooting fouls, multiple turnovers, OG Anunoby personal 5-0 run. But overall, I think I even had a drafted tweet ready to go that I was like, this is probably okay because they're the road team. It's all right to lose a game 1 on the road. And the Pacers had played it very much to script. They played that game, as I said on the preview. I was expecting those defensive matchups coming out of the gate. It felt like a very much a feel it out game for the Pacers. So I was like, they can go back to the drawing room in game 2, evaluate what they saw and make tweaks from there because they played it pretty much the same way that they did the 3 regular season games. Now, if you ask me the same question in overtime, it felt like whichever team lost that overtime was going to have this massive emotional hurdle to have to overcome. Because even if the Pacers had lost after Tyrese made the choke sign, do you know how much that would have been just the entire narrative cycle for the however many days until they played that next game? It just felt like that overtime was going to be monumental in the series. It really did.
I may have also had some drafted tweets ready to go if the Knicks had come back to win that game. And look, I'd be lying if me and a couple of Knicks Film School colleagues didn't have the drafts ready to go. If they came back and won the series, that the choke sign would have lived in immortality. Look, it's been talked about a lot in the evaluation of this series, and I don't want it to take away from how good the Pacers played and how the run that they've been on. Like, they haven't lost back-to-back games. You'd know this since early March this season. I don't want it to just be like the Knicks blew it, because the Pacers took this series from the Knicks, I believe. And there's some advantages that they clearly took. There's some places and areas where they took advantage of. They're the best places where they could exploit the Knicks. And it's where I want to talk to you about coaching, because I've been on a couple of shows the last couple of days, and I do believe Thibs got out coached by Carlisle. I do believe there are some advantages that Thibs did create on the defensive end as well. How much of a coaching advantage do you think Rick Carlisle was compared to Tom Thibodeau in this series?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Rick Carlisle has the advantage in most series. I think that if you look back at the regular season, and when they're playing like 2-game miniseries, that coaching staff is very good at game-to-game adjustments. I think that sometimes, as the Knicks fans probably remember, when they lost game 3 at home, when the Pacers were in the fourth quarter, and then Thibodeau had used, the deeper rotation, some of the lineups weren't exactly what the Pacers have been used to in the prior 2 games. I thought there's going to be a lot that they want to change from that fourth quarter if they could go back and do it over. And in game 5, they obviously made quite a few changes against specifically the way that they were guarding Karl-Anthony Towns. I think the one thing that I would say with regards to Thibodeau, just as my outside perspective, and surely if Knicks fans want to correct me and say like, no, you're way off base there, feel free, because I obviously didn't watch near as many Knicks games as you guys did. I think that I was surprised, and I was also like, surprised you didn't go there. And a few different aspects, in that he used more of the roster than I expected him to. He toyed with matchups more than I expected him to. Like, even me bringing up that play with Pascal Siakam in the first quarter, by halftime, they're like, okay, well, Towns and Brunson couldn't guard that at all. Let's run the exact same play. And when the Pacers did, Mitchell Robinson did a much better job of covering it up than what Karl-Anthony Towns did. That being said, I think that there's like 3 hallmarks that, like, from watching the Pacers all year, are buttons that you definitely want to press to try to limit them. And I don't think that it necessarily should have taken until game 5 to get there. Because, like, I remember talking to Benji, and he was like, what would you do against Tyrese? I'm like, it's got to be full court pressure. It's got to be face guarding from the minute he gets the ball. And I don't know how much of that's Thibodeau or how much that is the actual individual players just not being very good at what they're being asked to execute, because the ball pressure at times was there, and at other times it was pressure, I suppose. But I thought that they might go back to what they found in the series a year ago with Deuce McBride and be doing it with him a little bit more, because sometimes Tyrese is a big guard, but he likes to gather the ball low. And while he has added more variety to his gathers, his go-to is still to play lower than his defender rather than bigger, which makes Deuce McBride a little bit better matchup for him. And then also I was just surprised that they never tried Deuce McBride in the starting lineup to begin with, especially given that the success that the Cat only lineups were having against the Indiana Pacers and how hard it was for them to be guarding Cat as a driver. It seems like you'd want to replicate with the starting lineup as much as you could. And I understood playing double big. I understood removing Josh Hart from the starting lineup, especially if you can have Josh Hart pushing the ball more. But Deuce McBride would have given that a different 5-out alignment on both ends of the floor that I think would have probably benefited the Knicks a little bit more than what they saw. And then the third thing that I would kind of say is they needed to be able to play more different types of coverages. And while they certainly were a team that mixed in more switching against Boston and Indiana, they didn't look like they were a team that was very used or accustomed to doing that. Like, I feel like a lot of times you don't want the thing that you're doing to be the first time that you're doing it in the playoffs. And the Knicks switched less than every other team during the regular season. They had less variety to their pick and roll coverages than most teams in the NBA. So I didn't feel like they were quite ready to be able to like, hey, let's go try this and actually do it at a high level. But if I'm off the mark on any of that, feel free to be like, well, they actually did try this or that.
Caitlin, not only are you not off the mark, you're getting a standing ovation from a large portion of Tom Thibodeau detractors that think that the Knicks should be firing and looking for their new and next head coach at the moment. And look, I went on Game Theory with Sam Vecini last night, and I was asked about the Tom Thibodeau conversation, and I'll echo most of what I said now in that, look, if you're a fan or even just like a watcher of basketball and you call Thibs a bad coach, you're kind of telling on yourself and your intelligence level. He's a very good coach. He's established where he is in his career at this point with the things he's able to get his teams to buy into: the effort, the low turnovers, the free throws, the preparedness. And it's why, like, when I hear him get compared to Mark Jackson, I'm like, Mark Jackson made it out of the first round once, and Thibs has made the conference finals multiple times and has just a lot of more success than like a replacement level C tier coach. Having said that, what you're speaking to, I think, is the inflexibility, the stubbornness that has kind of marked his career as one of his biggest flaws. And that flaw gets magnified the further into the playoffs that you get. So when I look at Rick Carlisle and he's going deep into his bench with Tony Bradley and Jarris Walker and Ben Shepherd and Thomas Bryant and getting positive contributions, and I have to like hope and pray that Thibs plays a ninth man at some point, that shows the differences both in philosophy and just in style, that he has his guys. He's going to trust them. He's going to trust them all season. To your point about like the first time that you do something shouldn't be in the playoffs. Well, that looked like it was a hallmark and a strategy that worked for Thibs against Boston, that he like surprised them with switching defense. And it was like, oh, wow, that was genius. Then it gets to the Pacers series and it's like, you don't have a third card to pull, do you? Like, it was just, we're going to surprise them with switching. And to your point about the Deuce McBride thing, not only did he not go to Deuce in the starting five, he went to Deuce less and less because he just has this thing with size that he is always going to play the bigger player over the better player. And it's why, as good as Landry Shamet was in the limited minutes he saw, going to Shamet over Deuce more often just speaks to a blind spot, I think, of his. And it's why, like, I'm not going to ask you to weigh in on whether the Knicks should fire their head coach after making it to the conference finals for the first time in 25 years. But it's why a lot of Knicks fans are frustrated by the coaching advantage that was clearly gained by the Pacers in this series and lost by the Knicks in this series. I do want to ask you about another advantage that I believe existed, and it's experience. And it's the Pacers getting to the conference finals last year, having their own game one collapse and two home games that, like, you know this better than anybody. They had leads in the final minute of the fourth quarter of games 3 and 4. And in reading some of the press clippings and some of the articles about the Pacers, they clearly came into this season with a hunger and a point to prove that we didn't just get to the conference finals because the Bucks got hurt, because the Knicks got hurt. We earned that. and they wanted to earn that again this year and go even further. Do you believe that experience, and obviously I'm asking this from a Knicks perspective because we just got to the conference finals. Do you believe that the experience of last year's run helped this year's run?
I do, in the sense that I think that the way that they lost to Boston, especially like the very final possession of game 4, they got a switch between Miles Turner and Jason Tatum. They tried switching more in that series. Aaron Nesmith was like, dial 911. Tatum has a switch against Miles Turner, despite the fact that, Tatum hadn't shot the ball that well in isolation throughout the playoffs. He did shoot it well in that game and was attacking some of the switches. So Aaron goes over there to basically switch to blitz and to double it. The shot goes up, and then they have a weak side advantage where Drew Holiday ends up getting the offensive rebound, and the series is over. And I think there's something for the Pacers that stood out from why that ended up being a sweep, in addition to the fact that Tyrese didn't play in games 3 and 4, is that they knew that we need a defensive foundation if we're going to move further than where we just got. The Pacers very famously, I have a tweet about it that I was like, they have a historic offense. The defense doesn't need to be good. It doesn't even need to be mediocre. It merely needs to be bad. And too often, the first portion of last season, it was terrible. It slowly got better over the second half, but it still wasn't where they needed to be in an Eastern Conference Finals to get stops against a team that already had some matchup advantages over the Pacers. And I think that's something that they bought into as a roster. It's something that they bought into as a coaching staff. There was tweaks made on both sides there that they really wanted to reinforce that for us to get further than we did last year, the defense has to get better. And now you're seeing, in game 6 against the Knicks, a big part of the reason why they won is because Pascal Siakam improved his defense individually at Karl-Anthony Towns in that game. And Andrew Nembhard steps in place of Aaron Nesmith and has quite possibly one of the best defensive performances I've seen from a player for the Pacers in the 10 years that I've been covering the team. So, and their cohesiveness overall, even Tyrese, Tyrese is the weakest defender in the starting lineup by quite a bit still. But you could see from him a difference between Jalen Brunson, and I really don't want to compare and contrast and be like, one of these guys needs to play like the other guy. That was tiresome to me. But Tyrese, even with his show coverage, got better and was better to the point where he's actually stepping up above the line and redirecting Brunson at times. He can back off. He can get his hands in the passing lanes, where at times with Brunson, it was okay, you got to come out at some degree of an angle here. You got to provide some resistance and help Mikal Bridges out getting over the top of 2 screens as the Pacers ran 11 double drags in a row. But that being said, yeah, so I think the same could be true for the Knicks, because some of this is very similar. They might go back and look at that film and everybody looks at it and is like, what could I have done better to get us a little bit further than we did? Because as you're mentioning, a lot of these games these weren't all blowouts. They weren't decided by massive point differentials in either direction. So I think that there is stuff that they can take away there. And certainly for the Pacers, that was led somewhat by Pascal Siakam. I won't get into what the vibes and everything are around the Knicks. And I saw some stuff from Fred Katz yesterday about locker room things. And I don't know anything about that, but I do think that it benefited the Pacers to have experience headed into this run. Yes.
Yeah. Fred did the honor of coming on Knicks Film School at 3 a.m. It's so funny to be obviously I was in the moment there when Fred showed up and we put him on for half an hour. And then I clipped it out for YouTube, and it is the number one thing people want to watch right now is Fred taking us inside the locker room and look, it speaks to the connectivity that I think a team that the Pacers has become that can develop over the course of a full season and a full training camp. And in this case, a full off season that they got to develop. We'll see if the Knicks can overcome any of their, to be clear, basketball chemistry issues that didn't really develop over the course of a year. I'm curious what the Knicks do with their offseason and potentially injecting another voice, another name, maybe another starter. If Josh Hart is now going back to the bench full time. But yeah, I did admire that element of the Pacers, that they clearly have been through some wars here and they're battle tested. Just to use the cliche, they knew what it was like to lose playoff games in devastating fashion. So now they're going to win and make other fan bases lose playoff games in devastating fashion. Real quick, you just talked about Pascal Siakam's defense. I didn't put this on the rundown, but I was just reminded of earlier in the year when we were talking about a Knicks-Pacers matchup. And you were telling me, like, Pascal's defense is a disaster at the moment.
Right.
And I thought he was one of the more positive impact players, which is why I thought it led to him not just on the offensive end, but defensively earning the conference finals MVP trophy. How would you evaluate just his defense as a whole? And as we start to transition into the finals, how much could that potentially give them a chance that he's no longer, I guess, a liability on the defensive end?
Right. I mean, absolutely. Because right before he was traded from the Raptors, he and OG Anunoby were showing some slippage on that end of the floor. Like, I was watching both guys heavily because both of our teams were in conversations for OG as well as Pascal. And I was like, I think there's a soul tax that comes from your name being constantly in trade rumors and kind of thinking that you're going to be moving on soon. And when Pascal got traded to the Pacers, the first few games, it looked really good. They played the Phoenix Suns. He was playing small ball 5. He was switching. I'm like, okay. Finally, like, I've been watching the Pacers start Aaron Nesmith at the 4, and while Aaron's very good, like, there's just a lot of cases where it looks like they're trying to cover a king size bed with a twin size sheet. They finally have more lateral size. And then as they were going closer to the All-Star break, it was like, there was times where Pascal genuinely, like, they play the Hornets, they play the Houston Rockets, and he was the worst defender on the floor for both teams. And so it looked like, just conditioning wise, he wasn't used to playing at the speed and tempo with the amount of pressure that the Pacers applied defensively, headed over. And then when the All-Star break was over, there was still just like some scheme issues. They were never putting him. Like, if you look back at that series on Boston, in game 4, when Tyrese was no longer starting, he wasn't guarding Tatum or Brown. He was more often guarding Drew Holiday. And in part, that was because they found a role for him against the Knicks in the prior series that suited him much better. Him roaming off of Josh Hart and roaming off of Precious Achiuwa, playing backline sweeper, getting into passing lanes. And that's the role that they really embraced with him headed into this season. And to his credit, I think he worked really hard on mastering angles. He doesn't have quite the same pop all the time as a secondary rim protector or with, the high, rotational schemes and pressure trapping schemes that Nick Nurse was playing. The scheme that the Pacers play is polar opposite different from what he was being asked to do with the Raptors. So I think that there was an adjustment period, but slowly but surely, like, if you look at the impact numbers, he was in like the 99th percentile. And some of that's because when he isn't on the floor, Obi Toppin is on the floor. So, there is a drop off, but he and Andrew Nembhard are probably the two biggest linchpins and why they made the strides that they did on that end of the floor based on what they do within the scheme, in addition to what Knicks fans would have seen in game 6. So, yeah, I mean, I thought that he was fantastic on both ends of the floor in game 6. I think that probably is, what led to him getting the Eastern Conference Finals MVP over Tyrese, obviously. So, in a series against the Thunder where there's going to be, a lot of wings roaming around and doing a lot of switching, I think that he's going to be pretty important for the Pacers at both ends of the floor.
Is that a thing in Pacerland, by the way, that Pascal won it over Tyrese? Is there any consternation of like, oh, Tyrese should have won this? What is the media doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the record and I said that if I had a vote, I would have voted for Tyrese over Pascal, simply because a lot of times, like, even when I'm thinking about all-star rosters, if I think all things are equal, my vote will generally go to the person who requires more game planning. And certainly from the Knicks perspective, Tyrese is the player that they were more so trying to eliminate from the offense. Pascal, up until the second half of game 6, after they made the adjustment, was being guarded by Karl-Anthony Towns. So, and that doesn't mean Pascal had one of his best playoff games ever in that series. He was very, very impactful at both ends of the floor in game 6. But I just think because of what happened in game 1, Tyrese having a historic triple-double, Tyrese doing what he did at the end of game 6, and overall, he changes the geometry of the floor, whether he's taking 5 shots or 25 shots. And sometimes that can get lost in the narrative with him that you might not be seeing everything in the box score. But I mean, I don't think it was a thing. Maybe it was. I'm not as online chronically as everyone is. So I suppose maybe some people had some big feelings about it. But even going back to the All-Star game when Pascal was selected, and at the time I would have gone with Pascal as the All-Star just based on what Tyrese's early start to the season was. Like, you could see the Pacers coaching staff threw Pascal a celebration party when the announcement was made on TNT. Tyrese was there celebrating just as much as anybody else. So I'm sure that probably, I don't think it'll be a thing.
It's funny to hear your that's your tiebreaker is who teams are game planning for more so. The fact that we had a similar thing in Knicks lands with Cat versus Brunson, who should be the all-star starter, who should be higher on first team All-NBA or even the MVP vote conversation. And I got it from both angles where, and you'll know this, my colleagues over at the Game Theory podcast, both Bryce Simon and Sam Vecini, lean your direction that if it's a tie, I'm going to go with Brunson because teams game plan for Brunson. And here at Knicks Film School, our the great Benji Ritholtz, even DJ Zulo, they were like, it's Cat. Like the way the difference in the Knicks last year to this year is that you have to deal with a stretch five and one of the best stretch fives ever. And that was maybe earlier in the season when that conversation was happening as things started to happen with Karl-Anthony Towns and his defense started to become more of a liability. But you're in good company, I'll say, that when it comes to how that being your tiebreaker. And look, this finals is going to be interesting, at least if I try not to hate watch it over the next month. I mean, I don't know if you want to make a prediction here. I don't know if you've made a prediction yet on your YouTube channel or in any of your content, but like, what are your initial thoughts on the Pacers' chances to, I'll just say it, win an NBA championship?
I'm going to be honest with you. I still got to go back and rewatch the film of both of these games. And I feel like I've never prepared for a playoff series against a team from the Western Conference before. So there's a lot less film to go over. Like usually I have at least, 3 to 4 games. There's only 2 here. And the first game in December was a little bit iffy because Tyrese wasn't still quite operating at his maximum level at that point of time. Definitely, I think probably the biggest thing everybody's going to be talking about is the Pacers being a team that never turns the ball over against a team that consistently forces the ball to be turned over a ton, and what that could mean. I know on the most recent matchup, it was a curiosity because Chet Holmgren didn't play, and they put old friend Isaiah Hartenstein onto Aaron Nesmith in that game for a time and onto Jarris Walker for a brief time, which normally bigs get cross-matched onto Pascal, as you know from watching Mitchell Robinson, and Pascal's very good at punishing those cross matches. So I think that the Thunder they're gonna be willing to get very weird in this series, which I'm curious to see how the Pacers respond to that and what counters they have. Obviously, I think, the Thunder have seen a ton of zone. These are the two teams that have been zoned the most in the entire NBA. For very different reasons. For the Thunder, it's mainly Shea reasons, and the Pacers themselves didn't play a lot of zone this year. So there's a lot of little things that I'm pointing to. Nembhard's going to have to replicate that performance he just had against Brunson many, many times against Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. So I'm curious to see how everybody's going to rise to the challenge. I don't have very well developed thoughts yet. That's my afternoon project to get ready for my own preview and determine everything that I think needs to be pointed out there. But I will say that I feel somewhat similar to it as I did headed into the Eastern Conference series against Boston, that adjustments that may have been made over 2 to 3 games against the Knicks, I think both teams are going to be making perhaps within game 1, just rapid fire, because they both can take a lot of different alignments. They both can play a lot of different lineups. The Pacers at this point have been very good against most of the double bigs that they've played. They've played a lot of double bigs to this point in time, but I don't have a series pick yet. I think this will be by far the toughest test that the Pacers have faced. I think that if you were trying to create an opponent that would bother the Indiana Pacers, they would look a lot like the Oklahoma City Thunder. So that's my first blush take, but I don't have a prediction yet.
But I'm not going to force you to make one. I will say that, look, it's a very weird finals for Knicks fans and for me specifically, because it's like either Isaiah Hartenstein or Obi Toppin are about to win an NBA title, and I don't know which one of them I want to. The Obi thing is so interesting because I always thought the Obi hive that existed was ridiculous, but I also thought Thibs wasn't utilizing him the best. And I don't know if you know this, but you're aware he got benched in game 4 against the Heat during his last ever series with the Knicks, right? He got benched, and then it led to
there was audio that was leaked later.
A locker room kerfuffle. Shout out to Fred Katz for his reporting on that. And Obi's clear frustration with Thibs and with his usage in that game, and really 3.5 years of usage is more how I look at that interaction, or the incident, I should call it. The play that got him benched, and I went and looked up the game log, and it's just Miami Heat team offensive rebound, but it was Obi defending, I believe it was Haywood Highsmith, it was maybe even Jimmy Butler, and he goes and contests the shot, and he does what Obi always does, he leaks out. And whoever it was that he was guarding crashes the boards, gets the offensive rebound, and it leads to a bucket. This is Tom Thibodeau we're talking about. You're not crashing the boards on every play. What's wrong with you? And he benches him for the second half. If I were in the Obi Hive, I would have found it poetic that the play the Knicks couldn't stop in Game 6, and it didn't even matter if the shot was missed. If the shot went in, the Pacers were leaking out, was what eventually did them in and their season in Game 6. That it was a team of Obi Toppins, just a philosophy of we're gonna not necessarily give up the offensive rebound, but we're looking to get that leak out as often as we could, which just goes to why it's tough to write off a player if he doesn't fit a coach's style. If there's another coach that maybe fits that coach's style. And yeah, Caitlin, I thought a lot about how the Knicks just were like, here, have Obi Toppin. We're good. We don't need him, over the course of a very impressive series when he was impressive, I should say, but specifically in Game 6 and how he closed things out.
Yeah, especially with, he was a part in that fourth quarter, certainly, of the Pacers trying to create floor length mazes for Tyrese to be getting down the court through and be rolling to the rim and, making shots with Pascal, setting handoffs on Karl-Anthony Towns, or like the shot variety that Obi Toppin has shown this year. Like, I don't know if you would have seen his game winner against the Minnesota Timberwolves, but like I watched a fair amount of Knicks games when Obi played for the Knicks, and it felt like it was a development for him just to be like going off of an exit screen for Mitchell Robinson and having a quick trigger. Like that felt like that was an adaptation. And for the Pacers, like I'm watching him hit threes off movement, like going off a grenade and banging in a game winner, like hitting that one while he rotates to the top of the key. Like, yeah, it's been fun to watch the Obi experiment. I did a podcast once with Dan Devine where he said that watching Obi with the Pacers has been somewhat like watching the dog that gets to go to a special farm, only there really is a special farm and he just gets to run free.
That's great. Shout out Dan Devine. I don't even know if he's a Knicks fan, but friend, Knicks adjacent, I'll say. He's always been friendly to the Knicks world. Caitlin Cooper, you get to go cover an NBA Finals. I wish you the best of luck. I know Knicks Film School people wish you the best of luck, as we will be rooting for the Thunder most likely over the course of these however many games of the series. Do you have any parting thoughts to the Knicks audience, the Knicks Film School audience, to the Knicks in general, before you get out of here and go focus on the Oklahoma City Thunder?
Is it weird? This is an interesting question. Let's broach this really quick.
Please.
There's a part of me, because last year I picked the Knicks to win the semifinals over the Pacers. The Pacers are a better team now than they were then, but there's part of me that thinks that the prior roster for the Knicks still would have given this version of the Pacers more problems.
It's not weird. That's a lot. I think a portion of the fan base is wrestling with the fact that this team got further this year, beat the Celtics, which is what they were built to do. And I still think the version of last year's team with Dante and with Hartenstein and just this perfect fit of Thibs guys that all fit around Brunson was potentially more well equipped to win a title. And look, part of that is roster construction and maybe Mikal Bridges not being as good as we thought he was when you traded everything for him. And some of it is just fit, that to the style that Thibs likes to play, they were built to do that. And this year's team was not built to do that, which led to the frustrations and the inflexibility that we talked about in the playoffs. But I'm not even going back to the version of last year's team that you saw in the playoffs. That January version with Randall, I think that team was good enough to win a title. I'm just going to flatly say it. That's how good I thought. They were 11-1 during that month. Their net rating was like 14. And the teams they were beating, like they were running the Sixers when Embiid was putting up 30 a game. They blew them out in Philadelphia. They beat the Nuggets by 30 plus points. They had impressive wins throughout that stretch. And then, Julius Randle dislocates his shoulder, then OG Anunoby hurts his hamstring, and then Isaiah Hartenstein is given the biggest bag possible in free agency, and we never saw that team again. So it's definitely something I've thought about.
If I can offer a ray of hope, I mean, there is some symmetry here in that the Pacers were a team a year ago that exceeded expectations, got further than maybe most people expected them to go, and then got ousted by the Celtics in a close series, and it looked like their defense might be somewhat hopeless, and yet the team ended up digging in and finding some answers slowly but surely as the season went on, to the point where now they are advancing to the NBA Finals. So not sure which directions the Knicks will completely go in. If that does lead to a coaching change, that's not for me to say, but there still might be some untapped things here with the roster that they invested in and made trades for that might come with another year of being together.
It's my thought too. Believe me, it's probably the biggest takeaway I have from this run is that there's another level they can get to that maybe a full off season, a full training camp, a transaction cycle may benefit them from. And to what I asked you about before, how many sports documentaries of teams and of great teams and great seasons do we watch, where there's the beginning portion of we had to go through that really tough loss before we could overcome it to get to the really great win that we got to. And sometimes overcoming adversity can be a team's identity. And I'm hoping the Knicks obviously do that, as the Pacers just did. Caitlin, where can people find you and your coverage, I'll say it again, of the NBA Finals against the Oklahoma City Thunder?
So my handle on X is at C2_Cooper. I don't know what are we calling it handles on Blue Sky. I'm not sure, but that's my full name, Caitlin May Cooper over there. My YouTube channel is my name, Caitlin Cooper. Been posting videos after the playoff games over there. And then also the written work that I've done with previews and that Samson's done with gamers is available at patreon.com/basketballshewrote, which is where all the work is hosted. So I appreciate the Knicks fans who did tap in over there for the last couple weeks as we went through this series. And I also genuinely, when I say that, I have a lot of Knicks fans who engage with my work online and YouTube comments, who have subscribed on Patreon. And I genuinely really appreciate that and the kind words that they've said about my work, and the fact that you guys continue to invite me to have over here and talk to your fan base. So thank you.
Well, like I said, I wish you and only you the best of luck throughout the NBA Finals. But of course, it's always great to see you. And look, I said it earlier in the season that it'll be when neither of us thought we'd be in the conference finals, let alone the finals, that I'll see you next year. Look forward to collaborating then. Now I actually mean it. Next year, I'll see you, because obviously the Knicks and Pacers, aside from a crazy trade that I don't think will involve either team, we look forward to having you back again next year to preview a rematch of the conference finals. And who knows what happens, whether it's a rematch of the conference finals where one team went on to win it all in the next round. Caitlin, thank you so much for joining me. And thank you to everybody for tuning in to another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show, the final one of the 24-25 season. I say this at the end of every final thing we do before we start off-season coverage, but it has been a blast to go through the entire league with the rest of you, hear about other teams, hear about other fan bases, hear about other rosters and how their cultures and how other people evaluate teams from their perspective. And I thank you all for the kind words that you've given me throughout the season in doing so. If you dug it, and continue to dig what we do here at Knicks Film School, please leave a 5-star rating and review on the podcast feed. Subscribe to the channel. We have already begun the road to 40K as we cross 30K in the conference finals. So please help us with that. Until next year, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Let's go Knicks, and I will speak with you soon. Peace.